Should Christians boycott companies who support wicked causes with their profits? Well, that depends. Here's how I'm going to look at the question. I'm going to argue that one of the most frequently dealt with difficult moral issues in the New Testament actually addresses this problem. We've heard and we've read in our Bibles about the issue of meat offered to idols. And it's a very helpful principle where essentially the Apostle Paul says, look, there's right and there's wrong, and there's other issues where we're going to have to agree to disagree, and we need to get along. Those are the meat offered to idols issues. Well, the difficulty is knowing what belongs in that category. If I'm a bank robber, and you come to me and say, you really ought not to be robbing these banks. And I say, well, I have a piece about it, and I'm stealing from these wicked people, and therefore I think it's okay, and I've prayed about it. And you say, well, the Bible says you really ought not to be stealing. And I say, well, it's a meat offered to idols thing. To you, it would be wrong, but my conscience is clean. No, my conscience would be uninformed. My conscience would be ignorant. That's not a meat offered to idols thing. Again, the difficulty is what fits in that category. Well, the irony is that meat offered to idols is very much as close as you could possibly get to the modern practice of boycotts. Because here's the deal. Here's what Paul said. Paul's saying, look, we know that in pagan worship, there are sacrifices made to pagan gods, and some of the meat that is offered up to these pagan gods is in turn offered up for sale in the marketplace. But we also know that demons don't have any real connection to this meat. They're false gods. They're not real gods. Doesn't mean demons aren't real, but they're not real gods. And therefore, the meat is just meat. And when you go into the market and you buy some of that meat, you're just buying meat. You're not joining in the worship of those idols. Well, that's precisely the case when it comes to companies that we want to boycott. When I go to my local hardware store and I buy a set of screwdrivers, it may very well be that what the owner of the store does with the profit that he's made in selling these screwdrivers is go give it to the local devil worship church. That could happen. But I didn't give any money to the devil worship church. I gave the money to the guy who traded me these screwdrivers for it. I'm not responsible for what he does with this money. Now, some take the view that, hey, you may not be responsible, but don't you think it would be a good thing to help drive this guy out of business for his bad perspective? And I say, well, it could be. I don't have a problem with people boycotting whatsoever. Just like Paul doesn't have a problem with people not buying meat offered to idols. The problem is when we judge our brothers and sisters for doing it differently than we do. And that can go both ways, whether you are the boycotter who looks down your nose at those worldly non-boycotters who give their money to that notorious hardware store owner who worships the devil, or whether you're on the other side and saying, I'm just so mature and I know the truth and I'm like Paul, and you immature people that are doing these boycotts don't really understand reality like I do. Either way, there's a judgment of believers on believers that is absolutely inappropriate. The bottom line is this. When we do business with someone, we are, again, not responsible for what they do with what they make or what we trade with them. I'm responsible for what I do with what is mine, not with what others do with what was mine after I trade it with them. So please don't feel guilt over this kind of thing. If you want to try, Go right ahead. But let's none of us judge our brothers.